what was really interesting about the rise of what people call the knowledge economy or the information economy is the inherent urban-based nature of a lot of new economic activities. So you started to see, the rise in biotechnology companies. I spent some time in Boston studying the biotech firms in Boston. Fascinating industry that's extremely spatially clustered. So it's not something that is across space, despite sort of public policy efforts to try and share the biotech wealth. In fact, it's actually one of the most highly spatially concentrated industries in the world. And that's because of this idea that there's so much of the competitive nature of that industry goes beyond the firm, but rather you need to have these sort of extra firm relationships. Obviously, it's very much a quality-driven industry. It very much depends on the quality of one's products, the ability to retain the capacity to innovate, the need to be update, and the need to sort of surround yourself with supporting infrastructure, research institutions, universities, technology transfer institutions, a whole sort of massive agglomeration of economic actors. And so I think that that was where the original research was started from, and that's why there was so much emphasis on the sort of urban dimension of new economic activity. Why then are the new economies transformative processes inherently urban-based? Well, just to summarize again, it's cities that really provide the critical mass of economic actors. They can also provide the necessary social and place-based processes for innovation. So it's not just the old idea of an R&D firm taking an idea to market, but rather ideas that happen when people work in teams. There's a lot of codified knowledge as well as tacit knowledge that has to transfer across space, and that despite sort of arguments that globalization annihilated space, a lot of this research argues the opposite, that in fact geography and space become more important over time because our economic ideas and knowledge are becoming more complex, so you need to have that face-to-face interaction. And then, of course, the third dimension of why the new economy's transformative processes are inherently urban-based is this idea that certain cities can attract talented workers, high-skilled workers, and this is where the creative economy is most known for its work on sort of thinking about how successful places are multi-dimensional and diverse. Richard Florida, for example, in his book in 2002, really gives a tribute to Jane Jacobs and her work on the economy of cities, where she talks about the role of diversity in economic growth. Successful places are multi-dimensional and diverse. What's different now than 40 years ago is we're an increasingly knowledge-intensive society, and the value added of the creative economy theory is really that we have to think about creativity as the ability to create meaningful new forms. So for Florida, for example, the backdrop is the new economy, but the emphasis on creativity is really the crux of the theory. And of course, he was best known for his work on what he called the rise of the creative class, those knowledge workers that drive a lot of the create new, meaningful, new forms. Now, I realize that's controversial, we'll get into that in a moment, but you have to keep in mind that a lot of the empirical work done back in the late 90s, early 2000s was looking at industries like information technology, biotechnology, sort of science and engineering-based industries. And it was in a moment, and Kevin and I have talked about this a lot, is that when a lot of the empirical findings at that point were that the very individuals that used to maybe follow a firm when they graduated from university, and they would go to that firm, whether it was PepsiCo or a GM. Now, the research was showing that these people were actually looking to live in a particular place with certain kinds of amenities, and that was more important than an actual economic employment opportunity at a particular firm. So that was kind of an aha moment. And then there was efforts, of course, to prescript this out for economic development. And here's one model that I developed with a colleague a few years ago for Heritage Canada, but I always liked it because it's kind of just a simple way of thinking about what this means for economic development. So if you have the city being the talent center, and the necessary inputs, of course, are the knowledge workers as well as the new economy firms, what were the conditions that these people found attractive at this particular point in time? Obviously, the need for a thick labor market, that if the job didn't work out in one place, you could move to another place, so there was abundance of opportunities. The other sort of insight was that a lot of these knowledge workers were not looking for classic big C culture amenities like museums and art galleries, although those were important to have. It was more sort of Jane Jacobesque, just-in-time recreation, the ability to see Linda Field in the audience and all the work she does on sustainability for Kingston, and that's certainly a great effort, I think, because those things that people are looking for, the ability to just get outside, to have small C culture, sit in cafes or go to small art shows, and general sort of quality of life features. And then the third dimension of that is this culture, which of course was one of the more controversial aspects of the theory, but also really, again, the first time to try and systematically think about the important role of political openness and democracy and acceptance of the other as an important feature in what makes a city attractive. So why it was so attractive then? Those were the ideas that were really considered the breakthrough ideas by Harvard Business Review in 2004. I think that why it was picked up so much by local economic development officers and places was it gave them an opportunity to maybe rethink their economic development approaches in light of fundamental economic and social change. I think it really heightened the awareness of the unique role that geography and history and place plays in economic development, which was really an idea in contrast to Thomas Friedman's idea that globalization had annihilated space and that we all really couldn't do much, and this was sort of an opportunity to sort of bring agency back to local economic development. And I think Kevin Stoller's work really also provided new empirical tools, different ways of thinking about the economy that we hadn't thought of before. Not the traditional empirical tools, those in addition to other ways of thinking that might be helpful for particular places. Now, of course, academia loves to criticize anything that's popular, so there's a huge amount of writing on what is wrong with the creative economy, and I sort of grouped these into different critiques. Some of them are more ideological, rooted in much more profound criticisms of the nature of capitalism as we know it. If you assume that it's an inherently crisis-prone and uneven system, the argument is that this new economy is just kind of it's a model that just kind of doesn't question some of the more underlying fundamental problems associated with the kind of economy that we're in. So there's that end of the spectrum, and then on another end of the spectrum, people like the work of Ed Glazier out of Harvard, who I was able to work with a little bit when I was there, very interesting academic who really has a different perspective on urban growth patterns, who argues that you really, if you actually follow the market, you'll see that urban growth patterns result from things like climate, that people just want to live in warm places, and that skills really just match with job opportunities. And then he would argue that there's been so much sprawl, sprawl kind of development over the last 20 years, and that's a result of a loosening of land use planning. So that's how the market works, and so he would question a lot of the assumptions and argues that creative industries, we've seen the rise of a lot of creative industries. Some would argue the food industry, more organic and ethnic and those kinds of things, creative music, creative sort of traditional ways of thinking about culture is really just a byproduct of a fast-growing economy, and that you wouldn't have any of those things if we didn't have